So I would like to show you how to do the blanket stitch left-handed, like I did with the examples here right-handed. So I'm going to put my fabric in the hoop. Can be here. Tighten the screw and take a new thread. Let's take a brown thread this time. Threading my needle. And I'll start with a simple knot. I see if I can do that the other way around too. Yes. And I come up, let's say here, doesn't matter all that much. And now if I want to start a closed row like I did here with the orange thread, I am going to make a horizontal stitch first. Like this, just as a starting point for the row. And now I'm going to make my first blanket stitch, and I make them just about square, so that it will eventually will be this. I will go down here and come up here, and these points will form a square. The thread is behind the needle, and I can pull my needle through, and you see that you get the typical angular shape of the blanket stitch. So let's do several more, going down from top to bottom. Thread always behind the needle. And you need to pay attention to the tension. So if you would make the stitches very loose, like this, you will get loops, and it will be difficult to get the right shape of the stitch. So you have to pull on it, but not pull on it too hard. If you pull very hard, you will distort the threads of the fabric, create holes and make the fabric pucker. So this needs to be a bit looser. So that is something that if you're not accustomed to the blanket stitch, it might take time to get used to the right amount of tension that you need. And as you see, the blanket stitch forms a row like this with a vertical line and horizontal, well, rays, spokes, as you would like to call them. Now, once you've made a row of these blanket stitches, we can, as we did with the hemming stitch, blanket stitch as a hemming stitch, you can start to make variations in how far apart or how close together the stitches are, and you can make variations in the length of this horizontal part of the stitch, and finally variations in directionality of the stitch. But first, close together, make a stitch very close to this one, another one relatively close. You can have all kinds of distances between the stitches. And maybe now a big one far apart. So that's one variation that you can make. And the other one is the length of the stitches. So I can make a very short one here. So where the horizontal part of the stitch is only rather small, you get a very small stitch. And then I would let the stitches grow in size, somewhat bigger here, even bigger. And bigger yet. There is a limit to how big you can make the stitches, because with really big stitches you wouldn't be able to get the tension right. But you can experiment with it. So I've made now a series of stitches increasing in length, and I can diminish in length again. And for instance, make a very small stitch, but a bit farther from the last stitch. And you can change the direction. Up until now, I've been making vertical and horizontal stitches, keeping to the angular shape of the blanket stitch. You can also do a stitch diagonally, like this. And that's easier than when you use it as on the edge as a hemming stitch, because you simply, there you had to control the directionality by pinching the thread and keeping it in the right direction. But here you go down, you come up where you want the stitch to be, and you have your direction for the stitch. And you can also do it, of course, in the other direction. And as to how you hold your fabric and your needle, if you like, you can also change that direction, and maybe you like it better working like this. Or maybe like this. Whatever feels comfortable for you. And now I've worked from top to bottom, but you can also work from bottom to top. I'm going to close this row by going down just outside the last stitch. So now I'm going to do a row from bottom to top. And I'll show you a different way of starting the row. Here I started with a simple horizontal stitch to give the row a closed look, but you don't need to do that. You can also start, for instance, left hand, sorry, inadvertently took the needle in my right hand, like this, for instance. And start the row with a diagonal stitch, like this, in a more open way. So that's just what you like, and one of the possibilities of how you can start a row. And let's do a couple of diagonal stitches close together. You can now start to do variations and play a bit with the stitch. And I'll do an even smaller one here. See, thread behind the needle, of course. And create a little motif of diagonal stitches. And here, for instance, a bit of a longer stitch. And what's quite a fun thing is to show you how you can do a series of stitches where the horizontal part fans out a bit. So I'll start with a diagonal stitch like this. And keep the distance between the vertical part, the stitches at the vertical part very small. So coming up rather close to that last stitch. And now I'm nearly horizontal again with my stitches. And going in the other direction, and all the time coming up close to the last stitch, so the vertical part of the stitch is rather minimal. And more diagonal. Yep. And now you see you have a bit of a fan-shaped motif here. So you can do, you see now that you can play with the blanket stitch by changing how close they are together, how far apart, how long the stitches are. And what exact direction they have. You can make large stitches, very small stitches. And this variety will help you to create an organic look when you want to do organic embroidery. And a row of rather random stitches in all directions, a bit like I did here, could look like a row of grasses. And for instance, if you would do some French knots on top of these stitches, you would get a bit of an impression of a meadow. Finish with my left hand. And also for the end of the row, I could end, for instance, here with a stitch like this. And then go down just outside of this last stitch and close the row. But I can also go down a little bit apart, farther away from that last stitch, like this. And end the row in a more open way, like I started here also in an open way. And I've done this vertical, but I could also have done it a bit more diagonal. And now I can finish my row, my thread on the back side. And as you see, I'm now quite far away, a bit apart from the stitches that I've made in this row. Thus, to make sure that my thread is fixated properly, I make a little loop here. And on the next stitch, with the next stitch too, with a thread under the needle. And now I'm going to finish off by tucking the thread under several stitches. And I can cut off the last tail. And here you have an example of stitches, still vertical lines, but much more playful in size, length, and directionality.